Howdy, y'alls. Welcome back. It's me, Dr. Edwards. This time I'm here to go over some of the key concepts in our Week 4 module, Nomadic Pastoralism and Intensive Agriculture. So let's start with pastoralism. What is it? Well, put simply, pastoralism is a subsistence strategy where people rely on livestock, okay, as the primary means. I'll get into that a little bit here. Think herds or herd people, people that herd animals, right? Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs. Yeah, there are several. Now, what's really kind of important to understand is that pastoralism only really takes place where agriculture doesn't, all right, or can't. And that may be due to all sorts of different factors, like poor soil. It just doesn't grow crops very well, but still grows other plants. Maybe it's too rocky. Maybe it's too steep. Maybe it's at too high of an elevation. These are all factors that could easily eliminate an area for being developed for agriculture. All right, so that's how we want to kind of approach this. That pastoralism only really happens where agriculture does not. Okay, and in terms of the energy, it's the animal is converting some natural resource, in this case, edible plants, right? Into other resources that people use. So the goat eats the grass, and from the goat you get milk, meat, hide, hair, the manure. These are all products from the livestock. All right. And so that's really, you can think of the animal as being this piggy bank. All right, that's how I like to think about it. In fact, there's a group in southern Sudan known as the Nuer, and they are cattle people. They are pastoralists, and they herd cattle. And cattle is literally the idiom for through which everything is understood. Everything is defined and explained through cattle. Marriages arranged through the exchange of cattle. Family relationships, again, through the exchange of cattle. Your own personal lineage. You get a special name when you come of age and can, start with your first animal. It's really incredible. Check them out. You'll learn some really cool stuff. Um, yeah, some other key things that we see associated with pastoralism is that you have to have a domesticatable animal. Okay, for example, you don't see I don't know. Let's think of one here. You don't see whales being herded, right? They're not very well suited to it. Elephants, same sort of thing, right? So it highlights that the animal needs to kind of meet basic certain criteria. It's got to be big enough to be worthwhile, all right? It's got to be social, usually living in a group, because if it just lived on its own, one's not necessarily enough. You're gonna need more than one, all right? So group herd, and it also has to be relatively docile. All right, you can't herd an animal. You can't domesticate an animal that's trying to eat you all the time. It doesn't work very well, right? Like you're not going to domesticate a pack of wolves or lions or leopards or things like that. Predators tend to be right off the list. It's more animals that eat grass and other botanicals that tend to be the primary winners. And that includes cow, sheep, goat, pigs, and horse. And you'll find some unique examples kind of related to local ecology, like in Central South America. You have llamas, alpacas, vicuñas. Those only exist there, so they were only domesticated there. So yeah, there will always be those unique exceptions, but there's kind of the standard, was it five: cow, sheep, goat, pig, horse, that we see across the world. Now, another thing to keep in mind when it comes to pastoralism is that it's nomadic, right? This makes sense because if you keep a herd of animals on one chunk of land for an extended period of time, well, they degrade the land. You know, typically the pattern is that a nomadic group has kind of a seasonal round, right? Where depending on season they're in different environments that are well suited to their subsistence strategy. You might find in spring summer months that you move to higher elevations where you're getting fresh grass, and later months you're moving to low elevations. Every group is going to be a little different, but there's typically the seasonal aspect, right? And that helps allow environmental resources to replenish themselves, like the grass that the sheep eat, right? um, yeah. So this also means that you have to have a fairly low population density. You can't have large, giant groups, right, of pastoralists. It just doesn't work very well. Like just imagine all the logistical hassle of moving such a large group. It doesn't work. All right. So you need to be mobile. Um, let's see here. Yeah, extensive environmental knowledge. Lots of folks think of pastoralists as just knowing their animals. Well, no, they know the environment in which their animals survive. Right, the areas where they take their herds. Where I work in West Africa, there's a group, the Fulani, that are herds people, and they move all over West Africa. And that's one of the things about them. They're always moving, right? There are all these little groups of Fulani that are moving between all these different countries, moving their herds of goats and sheep and cattle. In that case, yeah. In addition, I always want to suggest never to think of these as clear, distinct boundaries between, like, as I mentioned before, with foraging and horticulture, right? It's not that people just stop foraging; they continue to forage, right? You think of it as a blend, right? You'll see extremes within any type. So in this case, pastoralists, you'll often find that they do some hunting on the side. I mean, they're out there, right? And hey, you see a critter, boom. In fact, lots of kids that watch herds, they all have slingshots in West Africa anyway, where I work, and they're always shooting birds and lizards and snakes, and that stuff goes into the family pot. Um, yeah, so with the pastoralists, you'll also see, maybe at their base camp where they spend a couple of months in a particular area, depending on the season, they may actually grow some small gardens. Okay, supplemental to supplement their diet. Um, moving on here, looking at my notes, intensive agriculture. Now, last time I talked about horticulture, agricultural in general, and I kind of gave you some big key things to keep in mind. And this week we just kind of further refine it, that rather than just being non-intensive agriculture, now we're talking about intensive agriculture. Well, what's the difference? Well, intensive, you're going to be using either beasts of burden, plow animals, right? A horse to pull your plow, a bull to pull your plow, anything like that. And or you might use some mechanized form of production. You might use a tractor, right? That's more industrialized, what we describe as industrialized agriculture, when you use machinery. But it's also intensive, right? Now, the whole point of this is that with these unique technologies, right, either using draft animals or mechanization, you are essentially multiplying the productive labor of an individual several times over, right? Because the machines or animals are allowing you to produce more, right? That's a key thing, right? You got to understand those animals or machines as kind of this labor multiplier. Okay. Some other key things you'll see with with intensive agriculture is modification of soils in some way. Use of irrigation, use of fertilizers. These are key associations, and all of that allows for greater crop productivity. Now, this sets up quite the nasty little vicious circle, right? So you have a city, right, an agricultural community that has an increased population. They're sedentary, they're growing their food, and people keep producing. And so they have to produce more food, which means clearing more land, planting more crops, and you just keep going around and around and around and around, and eventually it'll reach a crash. It will crash because you'll exhaust the productivity of the soil. I mean, there's only so much land, right? So yeah, this you keep this kind of this crash model in mind. It is fundamental to any intensive agricultural system. Another key topic this week is epidemic disease. All right, and this actually fits right in when we're talking about pastoralism and intensive agriculture. We often think that there's always been epidemic disease, that it's just kind of fundamental to existence, but that's not quite the case. It's really, for the most part of human history, it hasn't been. It's only really in the last 10,000 years or so since the agricultural revolution, and we can actually correlate that we only see epidemic disease occur in agricultural city-states, right? These places where populations have grown and are reliant upon crop production and surplus, right? Stratification, all those key things. Now, these large population centers make great environments for epidemic disease. But where did the disease come from to begin with? Well, that's actually, when we look at nature, we only really find it when you have large groups of animals, like giant flocks of birds, or herds of cattle, or other ungulates, other bovids. And so through pastoralism, we end up spending more and more time in close proximity and close contact with these herd animals. And when we're talking about evolutionary history, thousands and thousands of years, it is very easy in that sort of time, in that breadth of time, for a disease to spread from a herd animal to people. Okay. Now, in the written portion of this week's lecture, I give a kind of a comparison between what would happen in a hunter-gatherer type society, a foraging type society with an epidemic disease versus an agricultural city. Okay, and there's some big differences. In a foraging group, the population size is just too small, right? Either the disease is going to burn through everyone, right? You either survive and gain an immunity, or you die. And it's done, it's over with. And it burns itself out. Right? In an agricultural city, right? Increased population density, right? And it creates the perfect environment for an epidemic to thrive, right? There's always new babies being born, right? Think of that as fuel for the disease, okay? And in addition to that, when we talk about agricultural cities, they're not isolated. They're connected to other urban centers, other population centers, and there's trade, there's migration. Yeah, and it's very easy for a disease to move from one city to another city, right? And then it has, again, another nice host population that's continually replenishing itself, and it'll slowly go through the population. It's just the perfect setup, right? And it's a fundamental part of human history. We don't often think about disease like this, but we can identify that the first epidemics really only occurred in Eurasia, which had both the agricultural cities and the close contact with herd animals, pastoralism. And so, kind of thinking of the European age of discovery, when they're traveling around the world and visiting other lands. Well, those diseases came with them, right? And in the new populations that did not have any resistance, right? These are foreign, new, alien diseases. It wiped them out. I mean, upwards of 90% of the rest of the world was decimated within the first couple of months of European Eurasian contact to these other indigenous lands. So yeah, never underestimate the power of disease. Right? It is not necessarily you know something that's always existed for people. It's relatively new, and it's had incredible consequences. Right? In fact, you can explain a lot of our kind of modern social structure, organization, how we respond to these things, and all that's just relatively recent in the scheme of things, right? So that's where I'm going to leave this, and I'm looking forward to your all's discussion post this week. Got some juicy material for y'all to dig on into and show me what you're getting out of it. So yeah, I'll see you in the discussion boards. Have a good one. Bye.